Asexuality is a sexual orientation or identity label that describes people who experience little or no sexual attraction and/or sexual desire to have sexual contact with people. The asexual ACE spectrum is a complex spectrum of people that includes people with various different experiences in what we call the gray zone. For example, gray asexuals, who might experience some sexual attraction rarely or in some circumstances, and demisexuals, who might experience sexual attraction to somebody, but only after forming a meaningful emotional connection to that person. In a similar way to how people might experience sexual attraction and have sexual orientations, people often also experience romantic attraction and have romantic orientations. Having a crush on someone is romantic, but it isn't necessarily sexual. Not everyone experiences romantic attraction or experiences it in a straightforward way. People on the aromantic spectrum experience little or no romantic attraction and/or desire to have romantic relationships with people. The aromantic spectrum is a complex spectrum with many arospec identities like gray romantic and gray aromantic for people who maybe experience romantic attraction rarely or in many different complicated ways, and demi-romantic for people who might only experience romantic attraction only after forming a meaningful emotional connection. A relationship is a very broad term to describe how people are connected and interact. There are many different kinds of relationships. There are even many different kinds of close or intimate relationships. Recently, a group of asexual spectrum ACE characters were interviewed right here on ACE TV about their identities and relationships. Unfortunately, as the interviewer for that episode, I had a bit of difficulty figuring out what kinds of questions were okay to ask and what kinds were not okay to ask. After that interview, many of these characters, and they're all friends, they went off to talk about their experiences of me interviewing them and talk about some of the things that people should and shouldn't do when they're talking about ACEs or about the asexual spectrum. Today on ACE TV, we're featuring this conversation. There are a lot of issues when people are talking about ACE stuff and disability. Like, that was the first thing the interviewer brought up, asked me about, was my cane. Well, that was kind of strange. There are issues with my cane. I mean, when I have it, then I'm visibly disabled. I have a visible disability. But when it's not with me, then I don't. And sometimes I don't bring it everywhere. But I always have difficulties physically moving through the world. It's interesting because when it's visible, when I have my cane, people expect that I might need certain things to help me. And when I don't, people expect that I don't. It's important for people not to make assumptions about what people can do and what we can't do, because you can't always tell that by looking. But it is important for people to respect what it is we need, because we all need something, whether or not we have particular disabilities. And there's a lot of ways that people desexualize me because of my cane and assume that that's why I'm ACE, or assume that I must be ACE because I have a disability. I don't know. It's kind of annoying. I wish that wasn't the first thing that people brought up when they're asking me about ACE-ness.
I agree that people shouldn't make assumptions about somebody just by looking at them. For example, some people have an invisible disability, such as myself. I have chronic pain as well as a mental illness, which are disabilities that people can't tell I have just by looking at me. So it would be best for people to not make assumptions, but instead, for example, if they're going to be meeting with a group, they can ask if anybody has any special needs or any way that they can accommodate for people.
Before I met B, I had never really thought about using different pronouns or different gendered pronouns for different people. Being a cis man and just using my he, him pronouns, it never really occurred to me. But once I met B, and since they're agender and they use she, her pronouns instead of other they, them pronouns that other people in the community have used, it really opened me up to the idea of asking people for their pronouns just in case and not making assumptions. It was a little tricky to get used to at first, but after a while, now it's just second nature. After all, I wouldn't want to offend somebody accidentally. That's just inconsiderate.
In some cases, though, even if you are agender, you don't always use neutral ones like they, them, or any of the other options. Sometimes, like me, you just use she, her, or he, him, depending on your preferences. It's not really about the pronouns, it's more about just your own choices.
I'm agender, so that means that I don't identify as either male or female. I don't really identify with any gender. I feel most comfortable using they, them pronouns for myself. And in the ace community, there are other people that are agender, like me, or people that are non-binary, who don't also identify as just male or female, who also use they, them pronouns. That's why we like to ask people, not just about their gender, but we like to ask people which pronouns they feel comfortable using, and then use those pronouns.
There are a lot of other issues too. It's not just about disability and neurodivergent stuff, even though that is important. I'm in a romantic relationship with another guy. We're a gay couple. We use that term. And there are a lot of issues of people hypersexualizing our relationship because LGBTQ identities and relationships are often hypersexualized, even from people in these communities. And then at the same time, some people in these communities and outside too don't take our relationship seriously when they find out that it's non-sexual. So that's a complicated thing, because just because we're two guys and we're in love doesn't mean it has to have sex. Some people are into that and some of us aren't, and it's just as legitimate either way.
I'm panromantic, which means that I have the capacity to be attracted to people of all genders. Some people assume this means I'm super sexual, but that's not true at all. I'm still on the asexual spectrum. I actually identify as gray asexual, which means that I experience sexual attraction very rarely. Some people also assume that I identify as gray asexual because I have internalized homophobia, meaning I don't want to associate myself with being gay. But that's not true either.
After Louis and I got married, people started to sexualize our relationship automatically just because they assume that we're married, it's sexual and romantic. But we're actually in a queer platonic marriage. So even though we're together, it's not romantic or sexual, it's just platonic.
A lot of people have a hard time understanding that we've actually found the right person for each other. They think that because we're not romantic or sexual with each other that we can't have possibly found the right person. But me and B are completely happy with each other. We wouldn't want it any other way. It just seems like people really don't seem to get that we can be happy without having a romantic relationship. But we are completely right for each other. We've found the right person and we're completely happy, and that doesn't mean we've changed as people at all, and it doesn't mean that we're going to change. We're still the same people we were before we got married. We just added that to our relationship, and we're very happy that way. There has been this idea that women aren't supposed to be sexual. However, honestly, that really only applies to white women. As a black woman, my body has been continuously hypersexualized throughout my life. When I first found out about the ace community, I felt really happy about becoming part of a community. However, back then, I hadn't realized how North American and specifically white-focused the community was. I've also had the issue of being questioned about how or why I can identify as both asexual and aromantic. Other aces, especially, keep asking me if I have a platonic or non-romantic partner. And no, I don't, nor do I need to have one. I have friends and family and a dedicated partner. Even a non-romantic one isn't something that I should be expected to attain at any point in my life.
I'm honestly not even that angry. I've been through so much stuff already. I think I'm just becoming numb to it, which I guess isn't something I want either. I want to belong to a community where in other communities I felt so left out. But even here, I'm having such a hard time relating. So many stories I've heard from other aces I've run into sound the same. Oh, I've been ace since forever, even before there was a word for it. I've never had that luxury. People have always ogled over my body like some sort of commodity even. Maybe. But with the things that happened in my past, sometimes I wonder, if the trauma I experienced never happened, would I still feel like I'm ace? If I wasn't a trans woman, would I still be ace? Even though I have really great folks in my life affirming me, letting me know that whatever identity I have is valid, I still have some self-doubt about it.
I'd like to thank you all for sharing your experience today. I really appreciate it. I know I learned a lot, especially since I was the one who didn't know what questions I should be asking. So thank you for that. Generally, I think if more people knew about this stuff, it would be easier for people to think about and deal with their identities and relationships. And it sounds like you're all glad that you have each other to talk to and that there is an ACE community. It sounds like what I'm taking away from this is that the ACE community is a very diverse community. Find out more information about ACE Toronto online at acetoronto.wordpress.com or follow us on Tumblr at ace-toronto@tumblr.com.